Hello? My name is Charles Miller, 36 years old, a container truck driver in Tacoma, Washington. My life is an endless stretch of highways, nights spent sleeping in the cab of my truck at rest stops along the freeway, and the smell of diesel fuel clinging to my skin. I never thought of myself as someone special. To me, driving is how I survive, the rhythm of life I've chosen, even if it's never been acknowledged by anyone in my family, especially my father, John Miller. In his eyes, I'm just the guy with no future, a failure compared to my younger brother, Tyler, who works in finance in Seattle and is praised by Dad as the pride of our family. I grew up in a small house in the suburbs of Tacoma, where my childhood memories are of quiet evenings with Mom cooking in the kitchen while Dad sat in front of the TV, constantly grumbling about money or something I'd done wrong. My mother, Barbara, was the only person in the house who made me feel like I wasn't invisible. She always looked at me with gentle eyes as if to say I still had worth, even if Dad never thought so. But Mom was also a woman who endured. She lived in her marriage with Dad like a shadow, always patient in the face of his patriarchal control. I once asked her why she didn't leave, but she just gave a sad smile. "I'm used to it, Charles, and I still have you." Everything changed when Mom was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer on a rainy October afternoon. I still remember the day the doctor called me to the hospital, his voice low and cold. Just like the way Mom sat on her hospital bed, her frail hands clasped tightly together. "Charles," she whispered, "I'm not afraid of dying. I'm only afraid of leaving you alone." I didn't know how to respond, so I just held her hand, feeling the weakness of her fingers in my palm. From that day on, I started spending most of my time at the hospital. I took leave from long-haul trips, only accepting short routes so I could stay by Mom's side. I took her to chemotherapy, sat for hours in the waiting room and watched her waste away day by day. The pain tormented her. The chemo made her hair fall out almost entirely, but she still managed to smile whenever I walked into her room. "Have you eaten, Charles?" she'd ask, even though she was the one who needed care. I'd just shake my head, smile, and feed her spoonfuls of porridge, though she could only manage a few bites before exhaustion took over. I'd wipe her down, fold her blankets, and sit by her bed, telling her about the roads I'd traveled, the small towns I'd passed through, as if those stories could pull her away from the pain. Dad and Tyler were different. They only visited occasionally, as if going to the hospital was an obligation to check off. Dad would stand in the corner of the room scrolling through his phone or offering empty phrases like, "Hang in there, Barbara, it'll be fine." Tyler was worse. He'd show up, snap a few photos with Mom, post them on social media with fake emotional captions, then rush off because he was busy with a meeting or had an important client. I looked at them, a mix of anger and helplessness rising in me. Mom was the one fighting for her life, yet they only showed up to check the box for the relatives, to maintain the image of a perfect family they'd constructed. I remember one time after Mom had gone through a particularly rough round of chemo, she was too exhausted to speak much. Dad and Tyler showed up, bringing a cheap bouquet of flowers and a few half-hearted questions. Tyler stood by her bed, snapping a selfie with her, grinning as if this were a picnic. Mom struggled to look at me, her eyes almost apologetic, as if she wished she could do more. I gripped her hand tighter, trying to suppress the rage burning in my chest. "Done taking your pictures?" I asked, my voice icy. Tyler frowned, glancing at me as if I'd ruined his moment. "What's your problem, man? Something wrong?" I didn't answer, just turned away, knowing that if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't be able to hold back the bitterness. Dad chimed in, his voice as authoritative as ever. "Charles, don't make things complicated. You're always too sensitive." I looked back at Mom. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "It's okay, son. I'm fine." But I knew she wasn't fine. I saw how she tried to hide her pain, not just from the illness, but from the coldness of the people she loved most. I wanted to scream, to punch Dad and Tyler, to ask them why they treated her like this. But I didn't do anything. I just leaned down, kissed her forehead, and promised myself I wouldn't let her go through this alone. In the days that followed, I became Mom's shadow at the hospital. I learned to read medical reports, to recognize when she needed more pain medication, to make her smile even if it was just a faint one. I told her about my trips, about the time I stopped by Lake Tahoe and saw the water shimmering under the moonlight. "You have to get better," I said, "so I can take you there." She nodded, but her eyes seemed to know she didn't have much time left. Meanwhile, Dad and Tyler visited less and less. Dad made excuses about being busy with friends while Tyler was caught up in lavish parties in Seattle. Once I overheard Dad on the phone with someone. "She's not going to make it. Just let Charles handle it, he's got the time." Those words stabbed my heart like a knife. I couldn't understand how Dad could be so callous, how he could talk about Mom, the woman who'd been his wife for over 30 years, like she was just a burden. The tension in me kept building. I started losing sleep, lying in my truck's cab at night, staring at the ceiling with a heavy heart. I wondered what I'd done wrong for Dad to always look down on me, for Tyler to see me as a loser. But then I thought of Mom, her eyes, the way she always believed in me, and I told myself I didn't need their approval. I just needed Mom. One afternoon, as I sat by Mom's bed, she suddenly gripped my hand tightly. "Charles," she said, her voice weak but firm, "I know you've sacrificed a lot for me. I just want you to know I'm proud of you. No matter what anyone else says, you're the best man I've ever known." I bowed my head, trying to hide my tears. I didn't want her to see me weak, but in that moment it felt like the whole world was just me and Mom, as if all my pain dissolved in her words. But then one day everything changed. Dad and Tyler came to the hospital as usual with their half-hearted attitudes. They stood in the corner, said a few empty words, took a few photos, and prepared to leave. I looked at Mom, saw the sadness in her eyes, and I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up and followed them into the hallway. "Dad, Tyler," I called, my voice trembling with anger. "What do you think Mom is, a prop for your photos?" Dad turned around, his face red. "What are you talking about, Charles? Don't make a scene here." Tyler smirked as if I were some fool overreacting. "Chill out, man, we're busy, not like you with all your free time." I was about to say something, but Mom called me from inside the room. "Charles, come here with me." I turned back and saw her trying to sit up, her tired eyes full of resolve. "Don't fight, son," she said. "I'm used to it." But I wasn't used to it. I couldn't get used to seeing Mom treated like this. I stepped outside, intending to catch my breath and calm down. But as I passed the parking lot, I heard Dad and Tyler's voices. They were standing by their car, talking, thinking no one could hear. "She probably won't make it through the month," Dad said, his voice flat, like he was discussing the weather. "Don't worry, the insurance is over $1 million and I'm the beneficiary. Charles won't get a cent." "Nice, Dad," Tyler laughed. "Let him take care of her, it saves us the trouble." I froze, feeling like the blood in my veins had stopped flowing. I stepped closer, my voice shaking. "How much did you just put on Mom's life?" Dad flinched but quickly regained his authoritative demeanor. "Don't meddle in grown folks' business," he barked. Tyler stepped back, his eyes darting as if he'd been caught red-handed. "No," I said, my voice cold as ice. "I won't let Mom die in the hands of people who see her as a payout waiting to be cashed." The confrontation erupted tense and bitter. Dad yelled, calling me disrespectful and insolent. Tyler mocked me, saying I was jealous of his success, but I didn't care. All I felt was pain. Pain for Mom, the woman who'd sacrificed her whole life for this family only to be treated like an investment by her own husband and youngest son. I returned to Mom's room, my heart heavy as stone. She was still there, her tired eyes lighting up with a spark of resolve when she saw me walk in. She waved me over, motioning for me to come closer. I sat by her bed, holding her frail hand, feeling the faint pulse beneath her thin skin. "Charles," she whispered, her voice hoarse but full of determination, "I have something for you." She reached into the small drawer beside her bed and pulled out an old cassette recorder, the kind rarely used nowadays. She placed it in my hand, her trembling fingers steady in their resolve. "This is what I want to say to everyone," she said, "but only after I'm gone. Play it on the day I pass so everyone can hear. Promise me, Charles." I looked at the recorder, small but heavy in my palm. "Mom," I started, wanting to ask what she was hiding, but she shook her head, cutting me off. "Not now, son. I've arranged everything. Evelyn will help you." "Evelyn?" I asked, slightly surprised. Evelyn was Mom's lawyer, a stern but kind woman whom Mom had trusted for years. I'd met her a few times at the hospital when she came to discuss something with Mom. And whenever Mom spoke of Evelyn, it was with respect, as if she were the only person besides me that Mom could rely on. After handing me the recorder, Mom fell asleep. I clutched it tightly, feeling as if I were holding the final piece of her, a secret I couldn't yet grasp. "I promise, Mom," I whispered, my voice choking. In the days that followed, I kept the recorder carefully in my jacket pocket like a talisman. I didn't know what was on it, but every time I touched it, I felt like Mom was there, reminding me to be strong. I continued staying by her side, caring for her through the pain, the sleepless nights. But inside me, a fire burned quietly. Dad and Tyler might think they controlled everything, but Mom, the woman they underestimated, had quietly prepared something. And I knew when the time came, I would stand up for her for what she deserved. The final days of Mom's life passed in a quiet haze, filled only with the steady beeping of the hospital machines and her faint whispered voice. I sat by her bedside, holding her hand, trying to memorize every line on her face, even though it had been ravaged by illness. She didn't speak much anymore, but every time she opened her eyes, they still lit up when they met mine. I knew she was fighting to stay, not for herself, but for me. One afternoon, as I was wiping her face, she suddenly opened her eyes, her voice so weak I had to lean in close to hear. "Charles," she whispered, "live well, my son." I shook my head, trying to hold back tears, unable to say a word. Mom smiled, a faint, fragile smile, but full of love. That night, she slipped into a coma. The doctor told me to prepare myself. I stayed by her side through the night, clutching the recorder in my pocket. I didn't know what was on it, but it felt like Mom's final message, something she wanted me to protect. I whispered to her, recounting the days we spent together in our little kitchen in Tacoma, when she baked cookies and I sat on a stool, eating them while telling her about school. I didn't know if she could hear me, but I hoped those memories would carry her gently away. Mom passed away the next morning, just as the first light of dawn crept through the hospital window. I didn't cry. I just sat there, looking at her face, now peaceful as if she were merely sleeping. A nurse came in, checked the machines, and gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Miller." I nodded, feeling like the world had just collapsed, but I couldn't let myself break. "Not now." I called Dad. He answered, his voice flat. "I know. I'll handle the funeral." Not a word of comfort, not a single question about Mom. Tyler sent a short text. "Okay, bro. I'll come by soon." I didn't expect more from them, but their coldness still stung. Dad quickly took charge of the funeral arrangements, as if it were his chance to play the role of the perfect husband and devoted father. He chose the biggest church in Tacoma, invited relatives, friends, and even people I'd never met. I watched him bustle about, directing everything from the flower arrangements to the seating chart, a growing sense of unease rising in me. He wasn't doing this for Mom. He was doing it for himself, to maintain the image of a flawless man in front of everyone. I decided I wanted to speak at the funeral. I wanted to talk about Mom, about her fight with illness, how she smiled through the pain, the love she had for me. I wanted people to know she wasn't just a wife or a mother, but a strong woman who lived her life for those she loved. I approached Dad, asking to say a few words at the service. "Speak." Dad looked at me, his eyes laced with contempt. "What are you going to say, Charles? Talk about driving your truck? Or how you hung around the hospital to look like a dutiful son? Don't embarrass the family." His voice was sharp as a blade, slicing straight into my self-respect. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe those words came from my father right after Mom's death. "I just want to talk about Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She deserves to be remembered properly. Dad let out a dry, mocking laugh. You're not worthy. I'm the one who took care of her all these years, not you. I'll speak. You just do your job, driver. Blood rushed to my head, but I didn't react. I turned away, my hand tightening around the recorder in my pocket. Dad's words cut like a knife, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions take over. Not now. Mom had given me a task and I wouldn't let her down. That evening, as I sat in my truck's cab trying to find some peace amid the storm of emotions, my phone buzzed. A message from Evelyn, Mom's lawyer. Charles, meet me tomorrow morning before the funeral. It's important. I read the message over and over, a strange premonition stirring in me. Evelyn was someone Mom trusted, and Mom had mentioned her in her final days. I knew this meeting wasn't simple, but I wasn't ready to guess what awaited me. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the recorder in my hand. I wanted to press play to know what Mom had left behind, but I didn't. I'd promised her and I would keep my word. I just sat there thinking of Mom, of the years she lived in Dad's shadow, of how she always protected me even when she needed protection. I told myself that no matter what Dad said, no matter how fake Tyler was, I wouldn't let Mom be forgotten. The next morning, I met Evelyn at a small cafe near the church. She sat there in a crisp black suit, her sharp eyes softened by a trace of empathy. Charles, she said, her voice low, your mother prepared everything. You need to know the truth before the funeral begins. She handed me a thick envelope containing Mom's new will, drafted and notarized 3 weeks before she passed. My heart pounded as I skimmed the pages and saw that Mom had changed the beneficiary of her $1.2 million life insurance policy. It wasn't Dad, it was me. She also specified that if anyone, especially Dad, prevented me from speaking at the funeral, Evelyn had the authority to reveal the will right there. I looked at Evelyn, disbelief washing over me. When did Mom do this? I asked, my voice trembling. When she knew she didn't have much time left, Evelyn replied. Barbara was a smart woman. She wanted to make sure you were protected, and she wanted the truth to come out. On the day of Mom's funeral, the Tacoma sky was a heavy gray, as if the entire world was mourning with me. The grand church Dad had chosen for the service was packed with people, relatives, friends, and strangers he'd invited to polish the image of a perfect family. I stood in a corner of the church, my hand gripping the recorder in my jacket pocket, my heart heavy as stone. I didn't want to be here, surrounded by pitying glances and meaningless whispers, but I knew I had to do this for Mom. Dad stood near the casket, playing the role of the grieving husband flawlessly. Dressed in a black suit, he bowed his head to receive handshakes and condolences with a solemn expression. Tyler stood beside him, also in an expensive suit, his eyes red, but I knew those were crocodile tears. I looked at them, a wave of anger rising in me that I fought to suppress. They didn't deserve to stand there, didn't deserve to play the part of Mom's loving family. I took a deep breath and approached Dad before the service began. Dad, I said, keeping my voice steady, I want to say a few words about Mom. I'd rehearsed in my head what I wanted to say. About Mom's final days, her strength, the love she gave me even when the world turned its back on her. Dad turned, his eyes flashing with familiar contempt. Speak, he hissed low enough that no one else could hear. Who do you think you are, Charles? A truck driver who thinks he can address the whole church? I took care of your mother. I'll speak. You just sit there and don't make a fool of the family. His words hit like a slap. I stood frozen, feeling the blood boil in my veins. I'm not making a fool of anyone, I replied, my voice trembling but resolute. Mom deserves to hear honest words, not lies to save face. Dad let out a cold, mocking laugh. Honest? What do you know about honesty? You hung around the hospital for a few months and think you're a hero? I provided for your mother, for you all these years. Don't act superior. Tyler, standing nearby, chimed in with a smirk. Give it up, bro. Don't make a scene. Let Dad handle it. You're not cut out for this. He patted my shoulder like he was soothing a child, but his eyes dripped with mockery. I wanted to scream, to smash something, but I remembered Mom's words, the recorder in my pocket, and my meeting with Evelyn that morning. I took a breath and stepped back. "Fine," I said, my voice icy. "If you won't let me speak, then everyone will hear what Mom wanted to say." Dad frowned, confused, but I didn't explain. I turned and found a quiet corner in the church waiting for my moment. The service began. Dad took the podium, delivering a speech in a somber tone, painting himself as the most devoted husband in the world. He spoke of their years together, claiming he was always by her side in her final days. I sat in the pews, my hands clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. Every word he spoke was a lie. He wasn't there when Mom was in pain, when she cried at night, when she needed someone to hold her hand. I was there, not him. When Dad finished, I stood and walked toward the podium. The crowd murmured, eyes turning to me. Dad immediately stepped forward, blocking my path. "What are you doing, Charles?" he snapped, his voice low but threatening. "I told you you're not going up there." "I just want to talk about Mom," I said, meeting his gaze. "She deserves honest words." Dad grabbed my arm, squeezing hard. "You want to humiliate me in front of everyone? Sit down, now." He shoved me back, his voice loud enough to draw the attention of those nearby. The atmosphere in the church grew tense, as if everyone was waiting for an explosion. I stood there, staring at Dad with fury in my eyes. Then I pulled out the recorder and held it up for all to see. Dad froze and Tyler stepped back, his face paling. "What are you doing?" Dad growled, but I didn't answer. I walked to the church's sound system, plugged in the recorder, and pressed play. The crowd fell silent, all eyes on me, no one knowing what was about to happen. Mom's voice filled the room, weak but clear, as if she were standing right there in the church. "This is Barbara Miller," she began, "and these are the words I want to say before I leave this world." My heart pounded, but I stood tall, my eyes locked on Dad and Tyler, who now looked like they were frozen in place. Mom recounted her life, her voice calm but weighted with truth. She spoke of the years she endured with Dad, how he betrayed her more than once, the nights she cried alone in the kitchen. She spoke of Tyler, how he'd grown to be like Dad, cold and self-centered. "But Charles," she said, her voice warming. "Charles is the only one who never abandoned me. My son, the one I'm most proud of, was by my side when I was at my weakest, giving me a reason to smile even when I knew I was leaving." The church was silent as a grave. I heard soft sobs from a few relatives, saw emotional glances directed at me. Dad stood rigid, his face pale, his hands clenched as if he wanted to crush something. Tyler bowed his head, avoiding everyone's gaze. Mom's voice grew stern. "I know John and Tyler were counting on my life insurance money. I heard them talk about it, as if I were just a payout waiting to be cashed. But I changed everything. Charles is the sole beneficiary because he's the only one who deserves it." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dad shot up, shouting, "Turn it off! This is fake. You dare fabricate lies about your mother?" Tyler lunged forward, pointing at me. "You forced her to do this, didn't you? You're a fraud!" I didn't respond. I just turned to Evelyn, who stood at the back of the church, and nodded. She stepped forward, holding the will, her face stern but commanding. The crowd fell silent again, waiting. Evelyn stood before Mom's casket, opened the will, and read aloud, her voice echoing in the hushed space. "Mrs. Barbara Miller leaves her entire estate, including half the value of the house worth $500,000 and half the funds in the joint account worth $250,000, to her eldest son, Charles Miller. The $1.2 million life insurance policy has been updated with a new beneficiary. Mr. John Miller is no longer the beneficiary. The sole beneficiary is Charles Miller. Mr. John Miller and Tyler Miller have no legal claim, as they are not named in the valid will." The church erupted. Whispers, sobs, and murmurs filled the air. Dad charged forward, his face red, screaming, "It's fake! I'll sue! You think you can steal from me?" Tyler grabbed my shirt, yelling, You tricked Mom into this, didn't you? You're scum." But I stood still looking at them, a strange calm settling over me. I didn't need to say anything. Mom had spoken for me, and the truth was now laid bare before everyone. Suddenly, Uncle Luke, Mom's younger brother, stepped forward from the back pews. He shoved Tyler away from me, his voice trembling with rage. "Shut up, both of you," he roared, glaring at Dad and Tyler. "I saw how my sister suffered because of you two. John, you're a disgrace. My sister made a mistake marrying you. Tyler, you're your mother's shame. If this weren't a funeral, I'd knock your faces in." He turned to me, his eyes red with tears. "Charles, I'm sorry I wasn't there for your mom more. But I'm proud of you for doing what none of us could." He pulled me into a hug, and I felt my tears spill over, unable to hold them back any longer. The church buzzed with whispers and murmurs of judgment, but I didn't care. I had done what Mom wanted. Her voice had rung out, and the truth she'd kept hidden for so long was now known to the world. Uncle Luke placed a hand on my shoulder. "Charles," he said, his voice low but firm, "go home. I'll handle the rest here." I looked at him, seeing his red-rimmed eyes filled with determination. Uncle Luke was the only person in the family besides Mom who had always treated me like true kin. I nodded, saying nothing, only giving his hand a gentle squeeze as a thank you. I turned back to Mom in her casket, her face now serene as if she were merely sleeping. "Goodbye, Mom," I whispered, my voice catching. "I won't let you down." I walked out of the church without looking back, despite Dad and Tyler's shouts trailing after me. The crowd was still abuzz, their gossip spreading like ripples. So John wasn't the great husband he made himself out to be. Tyler, too, acting like the perfect son, but turns out, Charles, that boy who would have thought he was the one by her side until the end? Their words reached my ears, but I didn't stop. I didn't need their validation. I only needed Mom to know I'd done what she asked. I climbed into my truck's cab and shut the door. The world outside fell silent. Mom's final words from the recorder echoed in my mind, and I broke down, sobbing. "Charles," she had said, "if there's another life, I'd still choose to be your mother. And I hope you'd still want to be my son." I closed my eyes, letting her words sink into my soul. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but this time I wasn't sad. For the first time in years, I smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph over Dad or Tyler, but because I knew Mom had left this world comforted, knowing that I, the son she was always proud of, had stood up for her. "I'll always be your son," I whispered, as if she could hear me. That evening, as I sat in my small apartment, my phone buzzed. It was Uncle Luke. "Charles," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I want you to know what happened after you left." He recounted how the church descended into near chaos after I walked out. Dad and Tyler tried to shout and accuse me, but Evelyn stood up, calmly reading every clause of the will, emphasizing that everything was legal, notarized with 2 independent witnesses. No one could dispute it. Some relatives who had always bought into Dad's perfect image began to turn away, whispering about the harsh truth. Uncle Luke said my grandfather, a quiet but stern man, stood up, looked at Dad and said, "John, you've shamed me by being my son-in-law." Tyler stormed out mid-service, unable to bear the weight of everyone's stares. "You don't need to worry," Uncle Luke said. "Everyone knows the truth now. Your mom chose the right person to entrust everything to." I smiled over the phone and thanked him. His words were comforting, but I didn't need them to feel I was right. Mom had already given me that. Right after Uncle Luke's call, my phone buzzed again. It was Dad. "You're a bastard," he screamed, his voice trembling with rage. "You think you can steal from me? I'll sue you. I'll drag you to court." I let him yell, saying nothing. I'd heard these words my whole life, his insults, calling me useless, a failure. This time, they didn't hurt anymore. Tyler called right after, his voice dripping with venom. "Feeling smug, huh, Charles? You think you won? You're just a cheap truck driver. Without Mom, you're nothing." I laughed, not out of joy, but because I realized Tyler was no different from Dad, always blaming others, living in his own ego. "Goodbye, Tyler," I said, and hung up. Their curses were now like a passing breeze, no longer strong enough to shake me. 6 months later, things settled, but they had changed forever. Dad didn't have the money to buy out Mom's half of the Tacoma house where she and I had shared our happiest days. Per the will, I paid him $250,000 to take full ownership, and he was forced to move out. Uncle Luke told me Dad moved in with Tyler in Seattle, but they constantly fought, clashing over everything. Once Tyler called Uncle Luke, complaining that Dad was demanding and controlling, just as he had been with Mom. I wasn't surprised. That was their nature, and now they only had each other to face it. I moved back into the house of my childhood, filled with Mom's laughter and the times she endured Dad's scolding. I renovated the kitchen where she used to bake cookies and hung a photo of her on the wall, her smiling brightly by a lake during one of our rare mother-son trips. Every night I sat in the kitchen sipping coffee, feeling like Mom was still there, cooking my favorite dish. Some nights I dreamed of her, standing in the kitchen, softly humming, her gentle eyes seeming to say she was still here, watching over me. I'm not rich, even with the substantial insurance money. I still drive my truck, still live my simple life. But I'm at peace. I know Mom left this world believing I'd live well, that I'd cherish what she left behind. Not just the money, but her love, her trust, her final voice. And I, Charles Miller, the son once called useless, am now the keeper of Mom's legacy. Not just in this house, but in my very heart.